please, for Luke.
I'm happy with custard cream. I think that's quite good. So hi, I'm Luke. My pronouns are he, they, which is good to share your pronouns. I'm a design advocate at Zero Height, and if you don't know Zero Height, we're a design system documentation platform. We're outside, you can come and chat to us, win some Lego. Please come and try and win some Lego. That'd be good. But today I'm talking to you about building illustration systems. But before we get into the illustration system part of it, let's talk about illustrations more generally. And product illustrations. We all know what product illustrations are, right? They're the pretty pictures that go into our products. And if you've been building products in the last 5 or 6 years or so, they probably look like this because corporate Memphis. But why is product illustration important? Well, there's a few really key reasons. The first one is that pictures are really good at communicating ideas to people. There's a whole scientific theory behind this. It's called dual coding theory. Go and look it up. But basically, when we use words and pictures together, what that does is it amplifies whatever message you're trying to get across and puts it straight into the sticky part of your brain and makes it stay there, which is really cool. Also, illustrations are really great at guiding the emotional journey of a user and the emotional state of a user. It's really good to basically, through like colors, shapes, especially faces and body language, try and get across maybe how a user should be feeling when they're using your product, which can be really good when you're trying to make them, pay attention to something or make them feel really overjoyed and happy that they're signing up for a newsletter. Also, one of the advantages that illustrations have over photography is that they help us reach the broadest sort of range of people. There's a really great section in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, which is down here, where basically it goes into say about how the less detail you put into a character, actually the more people that can appeal to because they can put themselves into the character of that the shoes of that character. And it's really cool, really powerful. There is a point there about appealing to the widest range of people. And we do need to make sure that when we're using product illustrations that we're appealing to as many people as possible and as diverse a range of people as possible. That's a talk for another day, but there's a really good link down there that everybody should read around how making purple people does not automatically equal diversity. So, product illustrations, good thing. Yeah, we're all agreed with that, right? Maybe? Cool, yeah, thanks. Okay, so what is an illustration system? What am I talking about when I talk about an illustration system? Basically, what we're talking about is we're talking about a set of guidelines and principles on how you create illustrations and then how you use illustrations in your product. And then, this can be around like componentizing it and making it really cool with Figma variants and all this cool design stuff, which I'm going to show you today. But it could just also be a really useful set of guidelines that say, this is how you create it, this is how you use it in the product, and then a big library of illustrations that you can use. That could be the simplest version of a system, but I think that there is also a mass amount of benefit in componentizing it and making it a bit more sexy and techy and cool. First up, one of the big reasons is efficiency. If you break everything down into parts that can then be built up from a relatively small set of elements, you can build endless variations. And we've seen this with NFTs, with the good monkeys and all that kind of shit, which I'm way too old to know anything about. So don't come and talk to me about that. But it's really great for our product teams to be able to build stuff up. Similarly, if you build it in the right way and you set it up in the right way, you can have non-illustrators creating really cool product illustrations for themselves that serve the purpose for what they're trying to do. Also, it really shows value when you're trying to scale illustration out to different markets. It goes back to that diversity thing as well, because if you're making illustrations for lots of different places in the world, you can start to localize these. Switch out the people that are in the illustrations, switch out the culturally specific elements within an illustration, or even things like devices and hardware. People use different things around the world. You can actually make it so that a person looking at this feels like they belong because they can see themselves in the illustration, which is really cool. So how do you build an illustration system? So before we get into the fun bit, I do have to get into the boring bit. First off, stop and actually have a look at what you have already. I'm going to share these slides afterwards so you can go over them in more detail, but gather all of your existing illustrations, run workshops with the people who use them, figure out what works, what doesn't work, gather your values and principles. What's your company, product messaging? What are your value propositions? Really good laundry list of things that you'll probably want to illustrate first because they'll be the most common things that are used. Who's your audience? Marketing people and product people need different types of illustrations. Also, you can then start to audit, like, what tooling do they use? Am I actually building this in a way that they can use it? Also, things like what are common placements with illustrations? So again, like figuring out all these things in advance means that later on you're not trying to jam, a big square peg into a small round hole. And then from there, you can start playing around. Basically, start creating some concept art. Start figuring out what it is that you might want to create as an illustrator, and then test it with actual people. Figure out whether you elicit that right response that you're trying to do. Putting it in front of real people means that you then, when you start to build it out, have confidence that what you're building out is correct. And then we get into the fun bit. We get into the componentizing, so breaking it down. I don't think you can do a systems talk without referencing Brad Frost and atomic design, but illustration systems kind of work the same way. We've got the atoms, molecules, organisms, and pages, and now I'm going to do the very scary thing of attempting to show you a live Figma file. So I thought, okay, well, how do you do this? How do you break it down? So first off, you've got your atoms. This is same as in a design system. We're talking about styles. We're talking about the smallest base elements. And in this case, because I'm doing characters, let's just talk about colors. Colors, textures, brush strokes. These are all just straight up Figma styles. As you can see, they're all kind of defined here. There are other design tools available. You can do all of this in Sketch as well. Is that good, Emily? Good, thanks. Then we get up to your molecules. This is, atoms, molecules? Yeah, molecules. This is basically where you want to figure out all the things that you might want to change. So I'm doing a head, which is easy. And so all I do is basically, what are the different elements on a face that change from person to person? And we can go through and we can create all of these. These are basically just created as Figma variants and placed in there. And it's like, we're dealing with developers and designers, so you need a lot of facial hair. Elements are also where you might want to do some holding patterns, so things like holding shapes, so that you can start putting these things together and creating them as compositions. And this is where it gets fun. So basically, all I've done here, as you can see, is I've created a base character that has all of those elements that are there, and they're just all laid on top of each other. But now, if this works well, I'm going to have to, let's see if I can join the hotspot and it works. This is where a 10-minute talk becomes a 30-minute talk. And I've got this lovely little variance randomizer that works here. So what I can do is I can select all of these, and I can start testing out what works, or like finding weird combinations. Oh, is that everything? No, see, this is where it doesn't work. This is great. But anyway, I can go through and everything's just broken now. Something went wrong. Thanks, Fitzy. This is why I should have used Sketch. But anyway, what you can do is you can go through and you can change all those variants. You can come and have a look at me, come and find me at the stall afterwards and I'll show it to you in person. But it's really cool because you can just change out the variants, change the hair color, change all of this, get all of these endless variations. I think from those 15 elements that I created about 150 different characters, which is pretty cool and pretty powerful. And as an illustrator / designer, it's up to me then about how I want to then constrain that for the designers, so that I can either just create them a laundry list of 20 acceptable characters, or I can say, here's the base character, go nuts, which is pretty cool. And then if you're not an illustrator, you can still play around with illustration systems. I highly recommend checking out Blush Design. It's really, really cool. Whole libraries of illustrations. And then if you go and you add in the Blush plugin in Figma, you can go in there and basically pull up any element and then just start changing all of the different variants and end up with a heck ton of different variants in your illustration system, which is really cool. So the things that I didn't have time for, how am I doing for time?
A minute or so.
A minute or so, great, good, that's good. I'm about to write an article, so please follow me on social media that will have all the information in here, and it's about a 40-minute talk or so. So you can just read it, which will be great. But important to note, a system without documentation is just a library. If I'm creating that Figma file, that's great. But if people don't know how to use it, it's kind of useless. So make sure that you actually do some documentation, talk to the people who are going to use it, and figure out what are the things that they need to know so that they can use it most effectively. Also, if you want this to scale within your organization, figure out your contribution model. How do people edit things? How do people add to the library? What's the process for people to actually engage with your illustration system within your design system? Very important. That's pretty much it. These slides, including all of the things that you can play around with, are on that link, which I'll share on the Slack and the Twitter afterwards. But please follow me there, and you'll find out more afterwards. Thank you very much.